Welcome to this Conveyancing Matters chat in which Stu and I are going to pose the question, job titles, does it really matter? Welcome to Conveyancing Matters with Lorraine and Stu. Join us for a chat about all things property.
Hi Lorraine, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks Stu. How are you?
I'm very good. So we're face to face again.
Absolutely, back on the settee.
That's it. And we're going to be talking today about job titles and do they matter?
Yeah, this I think it's an interesting one to me, Stu, from a reasonably traditional sort of solicitor conveyancing background. And I suspect you're pretty much the same from when we talked off air. That really for us, the hierarchy within law firms was always pretty clear. And really what we would have, come through the ranks and understood, the job titles that we understand obviously would be, solicitor, partner, licensed conveyancer, legal executive, secretary, paralegal.
Yeah.
And that's about it, really.
Isn't it? Yeah.
And that's pretty much what, as a people in conveyancing firms would generally call. But now I see on social media, Stu, we have a sort of an absolute myriad of job titles. And I just wonder, is it clear to people what they mean?
It might be, it might not be. I'm not quite sure whether our clients would know either way. So I suppose it depends internally whether it's clear to the actual people that are working for a particular firm, what they do under that title. But I think it coincides, doesn't it, with not just job titles but different departments within a practice.
Yeah.
And going back to the era when you and I first started, certainly didn't have that. So now you've got post-completion departments, new business departments, pre-completion departments, title checking departments.
It's this sort of siloing of the conveyancing process, isn't it?
Definitely.
And I find this a lot when I teach. People know their bit and often know their bit very well, but they don't necessarily know what came before their bit and they don't know what came after their bit. And I can see from a business perspective why firms would want to organise departments in that way. So I'm not criticising it, but I think that fragmentation has led to a whole range of job titles, which I've got to be honest and say I'm not sure I necessarily understand. And I've written a few down, Stu, and the first thing I do want to say... Yeah, I'm going to. And the first thing I want to say is this isn't a criticism of anybody with one of these job titles.
You've got to be a bit careful there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could upset someone.
But so, for example, some of the, just a sale lawyer. I mean, I find that interesting because wouldn't you and I just expect,
I don't get that one myself.
No.
I'm not quite sure about that one, but I suppose, maybe there are firms that, have lawyers that only deal with sales, I suppose, and that's their way of classifying them.
Yeah, I found it interesting, and again this and it's become really so, down to the absolute minutiae, because one firm or one job role I saw on social media was a senior transfer of equity lawyer, which firstly implies that there's a junior transfer of equity lawyer, and to be fair, transfers of equity can be quite specialist and quite difficult, but I just thought to sort of pigeonhole it to that extent. And I saw another lovely lass who was a probate conveyancing specialist. And one has to say, well, how specialist are you and what do you know? And why don't people, know more about the job more generally?
Well, that's exactly it, isn't it? It begs the question, why do you need a junior transfer of equity specialist and a senior one? You'd expect maybe, a fee earner, a case handler, all these different names to maybe know everything that you need to know about handling a transfer of equity. Because of course when that client comes in, you don't know whether it's going to be complicated, easy, or whatever it may be. And you would again expect, wouldn't you, somebody dealing with a sale to have the knowledge to process something which involves probate. If it's a probate conveyancing executive, did you say?
Probate conveyancing specialist,
right, okay. Well, that implies then that the probate's been granted, they're not actually party to dealing with that area of work, and therefore it's just the conveyancing. So a bit confusing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, they're just assistant conveyancer, conveyancing fee earner. Well, we'd probably understand those, of course, but and I think it's great for people to have career structures. But I think one of the ones I found most baffling, and as I say, I've literally seen all of these on social media, was somebody who's got a job title technical solicitor. And I think that one really did get me a bit.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we have a technical support team, I suppose, in the office, but those guys aren't advertised that within that role externally. So they are solicitors, licensed conveyancers, legal execs, but they're within our technical support team. So that if there is something really, really, really difficult, then they're the go-to people, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's difficult to comprehend why you advertise that maybe externally. But I think this goes back, doesn't it, to the lack of staff that are out there, and maybe recruiting staff to become specialists within different departments is easier for a business maybe than it once was.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, I think though, particularly if someone's going to be called a technical solicitor, to my mind, and I hate to say this,
it's all technical, isn't it?
That was kind of it. I mean, does it not, dare I say it, slightly devalue the term solicitor? Because I thought we all understood what that meant. That is a professional qualification, a recognised professional qualification. And really, there isn't a lot of dispute about what it means. I mean, I would say I'm a technical solicitor because I'm a solicitor and I do the job, and lots of it's very technical. In probably the same way that you'd be a technical licensed conveyancer, Stu.
I can't disagree with you on this one. I want to, but I can't disagree with you.
Cheers, mate.
I can't. The whole thing's technical, but it goes back to the same analogy. Why do you need a junior and a senior person dealing with the same matter? It's difficult, isn't it? But times have changed.
Yeah, they really have. And I think actually, I mean, you said, about your lovely brother who's, that much younger than you, and frankly, very, very much younger than me. I'm old enough to be his mum. I suspect I might be. I might not be far off. But I suspect it might be a generational thing and a business thing, and the expectation of people in their, dare I say, earlier in their careers is quite different to
I think there's a number of
mine from the outside looking in.
Yeah, I think there's a number of different things you can apply to this. I think the job roles and the number that there now are has increased because I think people have more aspirations to move up that ladder within their careers, and this gives potentially firms a structure.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, I will just interject there, Stu, and I think that's really important, and actually to be, those firms should be massively commended in that there is a career structure and a career ladder, and people can progress to sort of known stages within their organisation. But I still come back to that point, known within your organisation.
Yeah, I mean, we have secretaries, we have assistants, and then we have conveyancing executives, which are on the par with maybe licensed conveyancers, solicitors in terms of the job role that they all do. So we have kind of a three step kind of process, I suppose, that people can work their way up. But there's a lot more of this in other firms now, where you can even have departments and people that specialise just in searches or mortgages.
Yes.
I don't like it because it kind of, skill set wise, you haven't got the whole package, and surely you need to know about a bit more than just searches if you're conveyancing. But from a business point of view, I can totally understand why it's an easy win, because you can train somebody up on one subject matter a lot quicker than training somebody to cover a multitude
but I also subjects. And I think I'd be genuinely interested to know, and I'm probably displaying my terrible ignorance here, but what concerns me about that level of fragmentation is that level of fragmentation across one transaction. I mean, so for example, one of the things the CQS changes that's recently been introduced to the core practice management standards is that, for example, and this is just one example, but what firms now have to do, or CQS accredited firms have to do, is have a sort of a process whereby stamp duty land tax advice can be essentially tracked across a transaction and captured at different stages, and if the client's instructions or the information the firm has changes, that then the resulting stamp duty land tax advice changes, and that has to be monitored and tracked. So I just wonder how those sorts of things happen across this very fragmented process per file, because you could have, I don't know, half a dozen people on a particular transaction, a particular file, and how do you...
And the rest.
Yeah, well,
you could have somebody giving a quote in new business from a new business department that then gets allocated to a conveyancing team, the different people within that team. You could have, or a lot of firms certainly have, a pre-completion department, a post-completion department,
Well, and then you've got the sort of client care and getting the initial client care paperwork out.
Onboarding.
Onboarding.
I've heard that. Onboarding.
Bear that phrase.
Of course, you've got your compliance officer, your money laundering officer. Don't forget those in the background as well.
Get your contract out. Yeah. It's probably 10. That's at least 10, isn't it?
At least 10, yeah. And
but
that's
if there's a technical
standard
problem on a file, how do you track that across the file?
We just do risk assessments at various stages of the transaction, so it will be highlighted on a risk assessment, and then it gets put in a spreadsheet that we can all monitor and track.
It's interesting though, Stu, because what I find and what I see quite a lot in firms that I go into is that a lot of firms have very sophisticated case management systems. You'd be amazed at how many people don't use them.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be.
They spend an enormous amount on this kit that's supposed to do all that stuff, but at the end of the day, it's the people using it, and they don't.
But it also depends on the firm, doesn't it? If you have maybe an old-fashioned high street firm that does a limited amount of conveyancing, that may have a couple of conveyancers, let's just say there, that have got 40 years of experience, they can do everything anyway, so they may not need that high level of protection. It's more where we have sort of less experienced staff at different stages of the matter that maybe we need that technical support, I suppose.
Yeah, and one a slightly different point that again we were talking about off air, Stu, that I think is really interesting is this one of the more traditional ways of differentiating just about everything in terms of people's role, if not status, was the use of the word trainee. And you've said that that's just become a bit of a a dirty word.
It's a taboo, isn't it? Because I can see the logic. Would somebody that they're buying a house, they're putting all their trust in you, do they want to put their trust in a trainee? Probably not, is the honest answer.
But then how did you and I train? I mean, it was
a different era though.
We were allowed to deal with files, and
I think the first of for knowledge and communication is different now. People can find out a lot more. People in dare I say it, the old days, they would trust their lawyer a lot more maybe than now.
Well, that's true.
They would hang off every word you said, whereas now the thirst for information is that they can seek that from elsewhere.
Well, I think, you say that. I mean, I do think probably one of the most dangerous things that we can be confronted with is, a client that thinks they know a bit and with access to Google.
A lot of clients do.
Yeah, with access to Google, and they think they've got the answer, and actually they're about to go and talk to the neighbour about the, about the right of way, and of course may well then just completely cut off the opportunity to get indemnity insurance and have a way around that issue and enable that transaction to proceed. So I do think the gung-ho client with access to Google is dangerous. Yeah, absolutely. And I've thought that for a long time, I have to say. Yeah. But I think the sort of eschewing of the word trainee has become quite an interesting thing. I hadn't really thought about it until you said it.
I think maybe we used to have the term paralegal. Was used in different contexts. I think a lot of trainees used to be paralegals for a period of time. Whereas now, that could be maybe an advanced assistant stage. They could also be called a paralegal. So I think some of these classifications don't have an exact defined term, they don't. Do they? And they're different per practice.
And I think the thing is, and probably one of the learning points for people with this vast array of job titles is if they are ever thinking about moving firms, is actually when they are talking to a recruitment consultant, when they are putting their CV out there, when they are putting their information on social media and they're selling themselves on social media, which of course, good for them, it's a brilliant thing for them to be doing. But actually, my advice to them actually is don't sell yourself on your job title, because nobody looking at it now is going to know what that means in your firm. Right. What you need to be saying is, these are the things I can do. This is the experience I've got.
I think from an employer's perspective, when you interview staff, you should be asking them questions on various subject matters anyway.
Yeah, you absolutely should. But I think there's a couple of points, isn't there? Because I think it can actually be really, really unsettling for somebody to go to an interview who hasn't thought about that, who gets a whole load of questions on stuff they don't know anything about, that perhaps an employer might have a perception that they should know about. Yeah. So that could be pretty demoralising. And also, frankly, the other side of the coin for employers is, you don't want to be wasting the time. No. And I mean that with no disrespect to anybody, but you don't actually want to be wasting the time on people that don't have the skill set that you need. Job, and if you are just going on this array of job titles, I mean, and funnily enough,
you talk about this, there are firms out there that have staff within their offices that deal with recruitment, solely recruitment. The market's at that point now where staff are so precious that people have recruitment specialists within their practice.
Yeah, I guess if they're big enough, or dare I say, the churn is such that it's easier to actually pay someone to do it than use a recruitment consultant. That's the other thing, of course, isn't it? Across a year, I can see that rather than paying X% of a salary to a recruitment consultant for somebody who's going to leave in 3 months, I can completely understand.
Going back to your point about fragmentation, the counter argument though is that is it fragmented to the client? At the end of the day, the client wants to get from A to B as quickly and as simply as possible. And if you have different departments dealing with different aspects of that transaction, we were saying before, weren't we, that if you had somebody that solely deals in mortgages and searches, if they go on holiday for a week, wouldn't be the end of the world potentially on certain transactions to leave that for a week.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have somebody that's covers just about everything, they go on holiday for a week, it can cause a nightmare, and it can legitimately delay things.
Yeah, well, of course you get a locum like me then, Stu. But no, I do. You've absolutely got a point there. But that then, and I think everybody would say that must then come down to communication and expectation. It's what the client expects. If the client can ring up or email and get the information that they want, I actually these days don't think they mind too much who they get it from. However, if they ring up or email and they can't get it because they can't get to a named person, or whoever they've ended up with just hasn't got the information they want, that's where the conflict can come, and the difficulty and the complaints and all the rest of it.
A lot of your work providers, they want a contact, don't they? They want somebody that knows the answer to all their questions. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure from the client's perspective how much of a big issue that would be if things are moving in the right direction. Because of course, if they are, then maybe they don't need to call and find that person who can give them that answer.
Another issue on communication. But I still think there's a reasonable strata of clients out there that do like and want the personal service, and rightly so. But equally, I think there's another level of clients coming up that just have a completely different outlook, a completely different expectation. But also maybe as a closing point, one of the things again I would perhaps encourage people with these job titles to think about is I think it's great for them to be able to put on social media that they've been promoted to role X, whatever that may be. But actually, funnily enough, again, if they are trying to sort of market themselves or their services, they could be putting themselves into too much of a pigeonhole.
Most definitely.
Because if somebody who's a probate conveyancing specialist, well, loads of firms won't do probate work. Or if you're a new build specialist,
lots of firms don't
touch new build.
That's right.
So transfers of equity. Well, some firms would say, well, we only do half a dozen a year or whatever. Actually, you're pigeonholing yourself too much. Yeah. And and you might have a much wider range of skills and experience than your job title actually.
Well, I always think if you do the same thing all the time, it must become boring too.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, you'd want to cover as much as possible.
Oh, surely. I don't know. I don't know. I quite like the idea of just thinking, oh yeah, I'll just look at them.
Yeah. Yeah. People don't do shared ownership.
No.
Commercial. New build, so you can throw all that at a higher level into the mix, couldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there's a fair bit in there for people to think about, Stu, I have to say. So thanks for that. So I think probably...
So what's your job title then?
Mine now?
What do we call you these days?
Well, it's obviously MD.
MD. Okay.
No, I just stick to solicitor. That's basically what I've always been. I was a partner for a few years. But again, maybe just before we jump off this discussion, because we did again talk about it briefly off air.
I thought it was going to be MD, author,
all round
celebrity,
star,
something like that.
YouTube star,
that's it, dog trainer. I don't know. There's all these different things.
I'm all of the above. Tick all of them. I think I'd tick the prefer not to say. To be honest with you, but the use of the term associate.
Yeah.
Because for you, it means something quite different within your firm to me. Because to me, an associate quite often, and I'm not necessarily always in sort of, more traditional firms, but is often a stepping stone for somebody who is qualified. So a solicitor will probably be trainee solicitor, they'll qualify and become solicitor. An associate might be the stepping stone to becoming partner. So it's that middle bit of the career progression. And that's what I would think associate means. But
we're slightly different. We would class it as a conveyancing associate would be a fee earner, case handler, whatever you want to define that as now, with less experience than maybe a conveyancing executive who would have a bit more experience.
Yeah, you see, to me that would be completely the other way around. Completely the other way around. So, but I suppose one of these sort of overarching conduct points, I guess we need to be a bit pompous and make is, whatever we do, we shouldn't be holding out our staff
Of course,
to
be
have
something they're not.
to be something they're not. I think, and that's clearly the big
Yeah.
professional conduct issue
Definitely.
for the firm, isn't it? But I just think, you know, probably best advice for people with these job titles is to actually think, what is that saying to other people out there? What is that saying to potential employers? Because I think it's brilliant when people have career progression, and I absolutely applaud firms that support their staff in that way. But I think it could have a negative effect when people are outside looking in, really.
Most definitely.
But that's
Most
my
definitely.
thought for the day. And what do you call yourself? I can think of a few things.
So can I, yeah. Or what do the clients call me, or other?
Yeah, everybody else.
Licensed conveyancer.
Yeah, see?
Partner.
All
Nice
round
and
good
simple.
egg.
Well, yeah, something like that.
Star,
Something
superstar.
Like that. Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's modest.
Greyhound superstar, fisherman. Because actually we right at the very beginning we did a chat about the things about us and the things that we like, didn't we? So if people want to learn a little bit more about us, they can
Look back.
Yeah, look back through 80 odd videos and find that one. Well, Stu, that's I think hopefully an interesting chat for people. Given a few thoughts for the day. Oh, and I will just conclude though with probably two of my favourites, if I may.
Go on then. Hit me with those.
Elevated remortgage case handler. I didn't know whether that just meant they were just, you know, sitting on a bar stool instead of a chair.
Elevated
remortgage.
Yes. I wonder what the difference between normal remortgages and an elevated remortgage
and
is.
but probably my favourite is pod leader.
Yeah, pod leader. You mentioned this one before. I'm not quite sure about that one.
But I think
Group leader.
group leader.
Group leader. I don't know.
Providing we don't end up having chief happiness officer.
Yeah.
I think we'll be all right, won't we?
Maybe, yeah.
All right, Stu. Well, on
No
that
worries.
bombshell. Thanks
All
for
right,
that.
then. Take
Cheers.
care. See ya.